Since 1884, PJ Clarke's has remained a classic and legendary New York City restaurant. The New York Times even called the establishment as the Vatican of saloons. They're most famous for their burgers, and I just had to pay them a visit.
It's a beautiful fall day here in New York City. Right now I'm at Central Park just doing a little relaxing, but earlier in the day I had a very satisfying lunch at a very iconic New York City institution. I went to the original PJ Clarke's in Midtown Manhattan. The place has been around since 1884. Food-wise, the restaurant is mostly known for their burgers, which was exactly what I had. Now, before I went to PJ Clarke's, I wasn't expecting to have one of the greatest burgers in New York City, but I was expecting to have at least a good burger and to have the experience of being in such a legendary institution. Now, of course, the food is always pretty much the most important factor when it comes to going to restaurants, but I'm also really into the experience. I love going to historical and unique restaurants. And the original PJ Clarke's is without a doubt a very historical and important place for New York City. And because of that, I was hyped to go to PJ Clarke's. Plus, burgers are one of my favorite foods, so it was perfect. Anyways, this was my lunch at the original PJ Clarke's.
The original PJ Clarke's is located on 3rd Avenue and 55th Street in a classic red brick building that was erected back in 1868. It was in 1884 that a certain Mr. Jennings converted the building into a saloon which served mainly Irish immigrant laborers. But it wasn't until 1912 that the name PJ Clarke's was applied to the establishment when Patrick Patty J. Clarke, a bartender at the saloon, bought the business and lent it his name. The saloon not only survived Prohibition but 2 world wars. However, more trouble came in 1967. Developers tried to purchase the building, but the owners refused to sell. As a result, the building stands out like a sore thumb as it's sandwiched in between 2 tall skyscrapers. But I love it. It reminds me of the house from Disney's Up, but it's even better than that because PJ Clarke serves burgers and beer. Stepping inside the restaurant, it's like being transported into another time period. At the front of the restaurant is the bar, but I headed to the back where there's another area filled with tables.
I just got seated. I'm in sort of this back room here. It's really cool looking. You can definitely tell there's a lot of history in this restaurant.
I loved the look of the place, from the brick walls to the old photos, dim lighting, and gingham tablecloths. The restaurant had an atmosphere that just isn't too commonly found these days. Although it should be noted that PJ Clarke's has expanded in recent years. There's a location in the Lincoln Square neighborhood of Manhattan, but also ones in other cities as well, like Philadelphia and Washington, D.C. While these other outlets pay tribute to the look of the original, I doubt that they could compete with the truly historical atmosphere of the first PJ Clarke's. Once I settled in, I began perusing the menu, which is physically pretty sizable. It contains a lot of standard American classics, but also a nice selection of oysters and clams. However, I was solely focused on the burger section. There were a few different options, including an au poivre burger, which certainly intrigued me since I love the au poivre burger at Raoul's in Soho, but I knew that I was getting the Cadillac burger.
I just ordered. I got the bacon cheeseburger. I mean, come on, what else was I gonna get?
It was in the 1950s that singer Nat King Cole proclaimed PJ Clarke's bacon cheeseburger as the Cadillac of burgers, and the name has certainly endured. After placing my order, it felt like I only waited a mere 5 minutes for my food.
My burger arrived, time to dig in.
Visually, there's really no wow factor with the burger, which aligned with my expectations since all I was really after was a good and satisfying burger. But of course, it all comes down to taste, and thankfully my first bites were incredibly satisfying. There's no denying it, PJ Clarke's makes a good as well as a juicy burger. I mean, just look at all that damn meat juice pouring onto my plate. I wish I had a drip pan or something of that nature to collect all those precious juices. Anyways, in terms of the beef, it was solid. Now it doesn't have the rich and funky flavors of some of NYC's top dry-aged specimens like Minetta Tavern's Black Label Burger or Peter Luger's Offering, but it does have a respectable beefy taste. Every day, PJ Clarke's grinds their beef fresh and cooks their patties on a griddle, which lends a nice sear to the meat. It's certainly a thick patty, and mine was cooked perfectly to a medium rare. The beef was topped with American cheese, which is without a doubt the quintessential variety of cheese for a cheeseburger. The bacon was double smoked and crispy, and while it's not even in the same league as, say, the glorious bacon atop Beaucheval's burgers, it nevertheless contributes to the no-frills but classic picture of an enjoyable bacon cheeseburger. There were also lettuce and tomatoes on the sandwich, but the interesting thing was that the onion was left beneath the burger. Apparently, this is done so that the onion can impart a subtle flavor to the bread. For my first bites, I kept the onion on the plate, but then I added it to my burger. I found that adding the whole onion was just a bit too much as the flavor was pretty strong, not to mention the fact that the onions had trouble staying on the sandwich. As a result, I took some of the onions off and found the burger to be much better balanced. In terms of the bun, it was about as basic as you can get. It didn't have any special flavor, but it at least did its job by holding together a big, beefy, and juicy patty. On the side were a good-sized portion of sea salt fries, which are included with every burger. Just like the sandwich the fries were paired with, they were satisfying as well. In terms of saltiness, they were properly seasoned and of course went along nicely with the provided ketchup. Overall, I was just really enjoying my lunch, sitting there in a classic New York City establishment that's filled with so much history. For instance, Buddy Holly even proposed in the restaurant to a woman he knew for only 5 hours while Frank Sinatra was a regular customer. Plus, I enjoyed my food. However, I wasn't full, so I checked out the dessert menu.
That burger, extremely satisfying. It hit the spot.
There were some typical options, but I opted for a seasonal item that wasn't listed.
Also, I just have to finish off with something sweet, so I got a dessert, I got a pumpkin pie. Super excited for it.
A few minutes later, I was presented with my pumpkin pie and it looked great. Although it was pretty big, it's a dessert that I wouldn't have minded sharing just because of how sizable it was. My first bite was pretty good. The pie had a pleasant pumpkin flavor, but unfortunately it did have a pretty noticeable flaw.
So the pie is pretty nice, but the only thing, it's just too cold. I mean, it feels like it was taken out of a freezer almost. But still, I'm enjoying it.
With most food and beverages, if it's served too cold, the flavor becomes a bit muted. Frankly, my pie would have been so much better if it was just warmer. But like I said, my dessert was still tasty and the issue with the temperature is really a minor complaint. Texturally, it was nice and smooth with a crumbly base, although there were some areas of the pie that had a more texturally satisfying bottom than others. The whipped cream was delightful and is always nice to pair with a pie. Overall, while the dish wasn't perfect, it was nevertheless enjoyable.
So that was indeed a satisfying lunch.
After finishing, I was presented with the bill, which came to $40.28, but with my tip, I spent just under $50. While it isn't cheap, it's nonetheless not too bad for that area of Manhattan, and I thought that I got my money's worth. But most importantly, I had a great time.
So that was a very satisfying lunch. I enjoyed my burger. I really loved that atmosphere. I loved being in such an old historical building. It was so cool looking. The service was solid, the prices were fair. Overall, it was a great experience. Now, as expected, the burger was nothing that blew me away, but it was a solid burger. It was a satisfying burger. It's the kind of burger that if you have, it would satisfy a burger craving. And my craving was certainly satisfied. But for me, the real excitement today was just dining in at such a historical Manhattan restaurant. Now, I'm sure the other locations of PJ Clarke's are solid, but to me, there's just something special in being in the original establishment. I love how the restaurant is just surrounded by these modern office buildings, and it just stands out so much, but then you step through the door of PJ Clarke's and you're just transported into another era. As I said before, my food was good. It's nothing that blew me away, but it was the entire overall experience that I really enjoyed. Today I had a good lunch at PJ Clarke's, and I'll certainly be back.